Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurul Azizah, study ID number 24120087, class PBEC. I want to talk about the beginning of the 20th century. The beginning of the 20th century. The end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century was the peak period of the heyday of the British Empire, whose areas were spread all over the world. Society, especially the middle class, enjoyed a high level of prosperity thanks to economic progress which was helped by technological progress. Everything was the order outlets on the surface, aided under the brilliance the art systems of the sex division have actually been going on a long time and are getting more and more visible. Well, remember, for example, that Carlos, Ruskin, and Arnold chose Christians of the city because they saw more rampant materialism, competency, skill, tasty, and aesthetic well as an economic and social relationship. Part 3. At the beginning of the 20th century, poetry no longer occupies a major place in literature and has been defined by popularity novels. The first of this period can be divided into two groups. There are girls who do not deviate so much from the standard that belong to the first class are mostly generations before the First World War, while the younger poets belong to the second group. In the party context, the essay poets were more realistic and retained more rhythm and rhyme and used experimental and confident bold from the forward were a generation class, first of all, namely Rudyard Kipling, 1865 and 1936. He was born in India during the heyday of British imperialism. Also included in the other generation is the sport Robert Bridges, 1844-1933. In fact, he has remained firm 4 years on traditional follows and avoids literary rebirths. To a young poet was Robert Brooke, 1887 and 1915, a poet who seemed far away from all the world's crossroads in his 40 in the world of his life, and Alfred Edward Husman, 1936, a professor of classical literature. To the most prominent parts of the early 20th century, William Butler's 1865 and 1939, and Thomas Turner's Elos 1888 and 1965 years were an Irlandia and his poetic career and characterized by an ability to devote through a variety of tenets of styles, the first of which is the Wanderings Orsim, 8089, a, rem- a rhyme story based off the ancient Romans. Prose. The 20th century saw important development in novel writing techniques, so we need to talk about them before we get to the words themselves. In the beginning of this area, the story material exposition that began in the previous century is still being continued. For example, Hedgeworth's limited the scope of these stories include fantasies about scientific discoveries, as well as John Wordsworth wrote about the upper middle class but from a technical point of view. Reading their novels were still the same as most novels in the 18th century, so that at that time there were kinds of novel writing techniques, namely the by the latter techniques as we see in Richard's novels, the autobiography techniques as used by Stevenson in Kidnapped, and good A techniques as we encounter in most 18th century novels. This is actually a new technique professed by a group of novelists that tell the story of their story characters from outside or from the perspective on the readers themselves, but at times of the awareness of the characters of their stories. This technique of called the stream of the consciousness, technique of the monologue and consciousness. The basis of the Cornet novels adventure story, but they are told by always paying attention to the atmosphere that determines the total effect to the story, and as the phonology and the story character drama. After a long period of showing of significant progress in money, the late 18th century in England began to see a return of life and excitement in drama writing. Among our players who lived at the time, George Branshaw, 1856 and 1915, was the most famous as Florence is the largest in the history in English drama. He comes from Ireland but from a young seed styled in London. He began after the war of drama as trick at a time when he better understood and admired the works of Henrik Ibsen and Nedwigan, a playwright famous especially thus we are complement the paradox in opinion which at first seems strange but throughout the campaign the truth. For example, in John Ball's Other Island, 80 John Ball's Other Island, 94. He refers in command convection on the English and the earth, and describes a farmer as a sentimentalist, while the second, of fleeting, show drama cover all kinds of human experience, such as sex, ethics, religions, politics, and so on. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.